Daniel, thank you
Sure.
for being here. Um, should we turn our faces on, or you just want to keep this pure audio
I'm eating
experience?
chicken, so
All right, no worries.
um,
Okay,
it's a thing over here.
yeah. All right, so to begin, um, so I really like the idea of like the Platonic realm. You familiar with this idea?
No.
Okay, so it's basically the idea that um, mathematical truths are actually real.
Okay.
So, for example, triangles. Triangles exist in a special triangle universe independently of our universe. Our universe could cease to exist. We could have a universe where nobody had ever thought of triangles, or ever thought
Yep.
of triangles, and yet the truth and all the truths associated with triangles would still be true in the triangle universe and our universe as well. So, in particular, we could say the triangle inequality, which is basically that, if you've got three sides of a triangle, two sides added together have to be, like, the length of those two sides added together has to be equal to the length of the other side or greater. Like, that's something that is true for triangles that exist in, like, a Cartesian 2D universe. So,
Sure. Yep.
we've got that, which is a nice little place to start. So, if we accept that truthiness of these things is sufficient for them to be real, even if they're not instantiated in this particular universe, even though triangles, of course, can be, um, then we can move on to the next stage, which is that of numbers. Numbers also are just like shapes. The number 3 exists in the universe of numbers, and it exists in relation to all other numbers, and everything that we can say about numbers and all the truths there exist in that universe, independent of our universe. And again, I know I'm laboring a point here, so I won't.
That's okay. I appreciate it.
Um, so now we've got shapes, we've got numbers, we've got all the mathematical truth associated with them, and then what we can do is we can say, okay, these things are static kind of things. The triangle is just going to stay a triangle. But what if we um, went into the realm of other shapes and we created mathematical objects of truth where the shapes were related to each other? So, for example, we could have a simple representation of some sort of mechanical engine where you had all these shapes and they could move, and when they moved, those movements implied other movements in the other pieces, like two cogs turning together. And so, within that mathematical object, you would have truth about that engine, about that system. So we could take like a physical engine in our universe, represent it mathematically, and then if those things are true, then there exists a universe just for that system, for that mathematical object, which is really cool. So we've got like an engine universe, but and also we've now got the situation where we can transition between states continuously because you might want to turn this cog, you know, some irrational number of a rotation one direction. And so you could have like a continuous set of values. Everything will work out exactly right because of the relationships between all the parts. Um, so we go to the next thing now, and we say that's interesting. So we could do that with a physical system. We could represent it mathematically, and then we could also say that hey, that thing is actually real in a specific mathematical universe for that thing. What if we did that with software? Our software works on a physical computer. It's instantiated in that. But we could take any software program and we could write it out on a whiteboard and all the relationships between all the bits and pieces. And if we wanted to, we could step through how it works on a whiteboard. Like, that means that the program itself, the software itself, can exist as a mathematical object. Which means, by our same logic as before, there exists a universe where that software and the truth associated with it exists. Now we're getting closer to the interesting bit, Daniel. Already...
Pauses for a sip of water.
Yeah, give in to the power of the tea, as my brother said. We have already created, and I'm going to use these words without defining them carefully, and obviously in a really good philosophical argument we'd have to do that, but just skipping over that. We have already, in some sense, created artificial minds. They may be devoid of consciousness and experience, but they're minds in the sense that they can make choices and decisions and process data and all the rest of it. And if we're able to do that through software, that then, by the same thing that we did before, implies that those minds can exist as mathematical objects. And so now, that means that, well, two things. One is, if we have a particular mind, there exists a particular mathematical universe where all the truth of that mind exists. And that mind exists, really, in that universe. But what's even cooler is that in the sense that every number exists and every shape exists, every possible mind exists. And now we can
every
say...
possible mind of minds exists.
Yeah, so now we can jump ahead and say, well, let's assume or make the claim that consciousness is a special property of a subset of minds. So that means that if we're able to represent each mind mathematically, and that implies each mathematical object can have its own universe where it's true, that means there are conscious minds existing in pure mathematical worlds. Now that was the big flag in the ground for me. We're not completely done yet, but that's like a big chunky X on the map, because you know the whole thing about dualism, and do you need the body for the mind? We have basically just hop, skip, jumped, proved that the mind can exist without the body. Sort of. We've said that if we took the essential aspects of what made a mind, like the essential aspects that meant that consciousness could arise, we could have that abstract representation would be sufficient in that mathematical universe to actually have a conscious thing, and it wouldn't necessarily require a body. Now, that's kind of a big deal for me because I'm an atheist. And I've just come up with a way for... I mean, we don't know what the self is, and that's a whole other discussion, but yeah, anyway, let's keep moving on, because this is a beautiful lookout and it had wonderful views, but the mountain continues, Daniel. The mountain continues.
I'm excited, John, because psychology background, I'm always a lot of the time I'm like, what is consciousness?
Yeah, well, the great thing about this is I've sort of skipped over the detail of what it is and where it comes from. I've just made a claim that is based on our one observation of consciousness, is that we have consciousness, and it seems plausible that it arises from the mind, and the mind arises from the body. I think those claims are pretty solid. Sorry?
What about, I was going to say, I'm thinking about string theory / just, multiple universes. And I'm thinking about consciousness as this engine room existing in its own universe, and the way it expresses itself is in consciousness. It's a very
Okay.
interesting idea.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I guess I'll keep going on my
yeah.
little tour, and then we can come back and revisit stuff. But the the thing you just said is related to something that I was going to say. It's not the same thing, but it's
Okay.
related.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I was talking to Zen about this and sort of trying to explain the idea, and then he said something like, "Does that mean that my mind exists abstractly in one of these mathematical universes?" And obviously, he used the language of a 10-year-old, so it's a bit different. I'm paraphrasing. And I was like, yeah, well, I guess that makes sense because, um, by the same reasoning that every number can exist, every mind should be able to exist. And
Mm,
then that got interesting because Zen's mind is a product of the world.
mm, mm.
Zen's childhood, he partly grew up in Japan, he partly grew up in Australia. That means that in order for his mind to make sense,
Yeah.
it implies some degree of representation of his experiences of the world. There needs to be an
Yes.
abstract Japan in the universe where Zen's mind exists, and there needs to be an abstract Australia in that. And then, what's really cool about that is that if you think about this enough, like he was sitting at the kitchen table at the time, eating some food out of a bowl, and I was like, well, your experience of having that bowl there, because this mathematical stuff has to actually be consistent in the same way that the engine, you move one cog, everything else needs to move with the whole system. If he's eating from that bowl and the bowl is supported by the bowl implies the table. And the table can't just be there. The table implies the
Uh-huh.
floor, and the floor implies
Mhm,
the
mhm,
house, and the house implies the soil underneath it. And if you follow this through, you get a
mm.
situation where, in order for the existence of his mind, you have to have the world.
Yeah.
And not only that, but his mind is dependent on my mind
Yep.
and all the conversations we had. So that means that the abstraction, the mathematical essence of who I am, or what my mind is, I should probably say instead, has to exist in the same mathematical universe as his. And if you follow this through enough, you end up with a situation where the entire universe has to have existed in this world, and the people living in it would have no way to tell whether they lived in the real world or the mathematical world. Yep. So, you still there, Daniel? Or am I just talking to myself now?
Yep. Sorry. No. I didn't realize I was muted.
It was a
Sorry.
chicken moment, was it?
No, it was downstairs to some.
Yeah. So anyway, the interesting thing about this, aside from that whole Matrix type thing of like, whoa, man, am I in a simulation or whatever? It's not quite the same as that. But the interesting thing about it is that if you were making assumptions about the Platonic realm being this special world for triangles, but somehow it's not, like some people would say that's not actually real because it's not instantiated in our universe. All of a sudden, we've gone down the Platonic realm path and we've ended up with a
Sorry, I
situation
couldn't
where
hear what
it's
you were saying.
okay.
I said, I'll take the box with me, but I'll put all this back in there.
Oh no, that's fine. I I've got a couple more cases in there. I was going to bring up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. There's I think three more.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries. Sorry, John, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah. No, that was a funny little blip
Yeah.
of
No, sorry.
reality in the background there. But um, yeah. Anyway, what I'm saying here is that we start down this path where people dispute, is the Platonic realm actually real or not?
Yeah.
But by going down that path sufficiently, we ended up with a situation where it was indistinguishable from our world. So that not only is cool from the like simulation type similar kind of thing, but it's also saying that the platonic realm is as real as our realm.
Yes. Sorry, John.
That's alright.
Sorry.
That's it. We're at the top of the mountain now.
Okay, I'm gonna have to. Sorry, John. I was gonna say I'm gonna have to get you to go back 3 minutes because I could hear someone going for glass bottles, and I had a bunch in the garage. So
Yeah, look, I'm
I was
happy
taking
to
up.
revisit any part of this journey. So, where were you up to?
All right. I
Should we go back to the lookout where we were before?
then
Yep.